All right, everyone, it's time for post-Brexit analysis time because Boris Johnson right now has told the EU to suck it on trade and is saying, basically what happened is this. The Brexit articles came with the caveat that there's a deal involved in which if Boris Johnson and the UK want a trade deal with the EU right away, fast-tracked, there are certain things that they agreed to having in that trade deal. The EU essentially got carte blanche. So they demanded control over basically every aspect of the UK's economic system in the next year until they have a more permanent trade deal. Boris Johnson has very wisely said, okay, that's the auspices of any potential trade deal under those terms. But I'd just rather not have a trade deal. So essentially he has defaulted to a pseudo-hard Brexit right now by simply ignoring those auspices that only take effect if you want the trade deal. But if you don't really care about that and you say, fuck you to the EU and go over and talk to the US instead, well, you don't have to have that form of soft Brexit. This avoids a huge amount of humiliation that I guarantee the UK would have suffered. This is a smart move by Boris Johnson. It's the best that he could do. And there are people screeching about it. Oh my God, he's abandoning our allies and stuff. Well, the US is one of your allies. Why don't you just let us have a trade deal with you? What's wrong with that? What, the U.S. Buying your goods isn't good enough for you? You have to sell them semi-locally to people who are from France or Germany? Like their money is somehow better? Well, it's not. I don't understand the ethos, the principle behind that. And there'd probably be a trade deal. It's just that Boris Johnson is saying, I'm in no hurry to get the trade deal. Therefore, I'm not simply going to rubber stamp what we've already worked on. I want you to back off on our fisheries and some of these other things that were big political issues and not just with conservatives within the UK. I think this is very smart. And then in his speech about it, it was really, really funny because he was talking about how there were people out there that hated Americans and like Americaphobia or something like that. I thought that was really funny. It's not often that you hear a world leader actually talk well about the United States, at least that openly and publicly in the more broad sense. More often we get called the Great Satan, so it's very interesting to see. And so thank you, Boris Johnson. What a stand-up guy. It's funny, have you noticed that increasingly he dresses the same as Donald Trump? And they both have the wild hair thing going on. When they're standing next to each other, it is actually kind of amusing, I will admit. So the EU has gotten shafted on its trade deal with the UK. Trust me, again, this will hurt the EU more than it'll hurt the UK. The UK can get the same goods, services sort of agreements going with other countries. Now that they're a sovereign state able to negotiate their own rules, because they don't have to live under the bureaucracy of the EU with, it's got probably even more regulations than the US has, which is quite an accomplishment. They've got much more maneuverability. They can make a trade deal with India, former Commonwealth states, India, Pakistan, some of these groups. They can go off back into Africa and start striking trade deals in the Ivory Coast and do whatever they want. They couldn't do that before, now could they? They had to live up to the EU's rules in addition to their own. The problem with such a post-nationalist group is the UK's government creates a regulatory structure, then the EU creates a regulatory structure. They have to hash everything out between them, number one, which takes a long time, and then you're twice as constrained in your maneuverability. You have to eliminate one of those two groups. Obviously, unless you want to get absorbed fully and eliminate the national government, you have to eliminate the post-national one. This is why Brexit is not the last time that a nation will leave the EU. It's my prediction that pretty soon the EU won't exist in its current form. It'll be smaller. It'll be stronger, ironically enough, instead of weaker, because it'll have a more homogenized sort of cultural core. It'll be easier for them to maneuver as well. It would be easier if the EU were to collapse tomorrow and become Germany and France and some of their vassal states. It would be easier. With the Netherlands presumably holding on as the banking center, Brussels as the bureaucratic sector, Germany and France, larger, more powerful nations supplying money with land and manpower, and so forth. Austria certainly would do whatever Germany wants to do. It would make more sense. As a union, culturally it would make more sense. Geographically, it would make more sense. Economically, it would definitely make more sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to have countries like Hungary or Italy, along with countries like the Netherlands or France, for economic purposes. I mean, again, the maneuverability issue is the problem. It would make more sense for there to be a Southern European framework a Western European bloc, and then sort of a North Sea Scandinavian bloc, and then an Eastern European one, which would be more isolated when it comes to immigration. They need to be able to respond to their own individual economic backgrounds more ably than they can in the EU. It's too strangulating. This was the main bitch of the UK. The main complaint that was had was, hey, most of our rules no longer come from the UK itself. They come from this foreign state that we don't have full representation even in. We have seats at the table, but not enough to override everyone else at once. So if they decide that they want access to our fishing waters, there's not a whole lot we can actually do. And this is why other nations will leave as well, I think. So good on Boris Johnson. Good decision making. And of course, it's got the far left in a tizzy. Well, that's just the icing on the cake. They deserve to be in a tizzy. That's about all. Peace out.